Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the ItCast, Real Talk on Sex, and I'm your host, Nika Sherelle. The ItCast is our community outreach podcast that increases diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. Through this work, we are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. This episode is brought to you by the House of Sherelle, that provides events, sex toys, as well as ah, product sex toys events. Please check out the House of Sherelle, triggerhappytoy.com, and we'll provide you more information on that later. So we have some upcoming events. This season, we will be doing Releasing Sexual Shame, A Pathway to Freedom. That's coming up on March 11th with Ethology Collective from 1 to 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We also have that workshop coming again on March 21st with Boundless Events. You can see more about that. It'll be from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard, as well as you can find that event at boundlessevents.org. Go or click the QR code in the corner. Yeah. Okay, this weekend at Jolene, San Francisco, we are also going to be there with the Sunday Brunch Variety Show. That is from noon to 4. Come join us at Jolene's amazing show, and there's a buffet. If you want one-on-one coaching, you can see more on our events calendar at theitcast.com. And if you want one-on-one coaching with me, go ahead and book a free connection session. Ask us anything. We want to hear from you. So click the link on your screen, wherever it is, and submit your questions for the show. Also, just pop them in the chat. You can get access to our bonus content on Patreon, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and share with your community. All right, go. So this week's topic is Real Talk on Being Unseen. Today in the booth, we have Clarkisha Kent. Clarkisha Kent is a Nigerian-American writer, culture critic, former columnist, and up-and-coming author. Committed to telling inclusive stories via unique viewpoints from nigh-infancy, she is fascinated with using storytelling and cultural criticism, not as a way to overcome or transcend her unique identities as a fat, bisexual, disabled, Black African-American woman, but as a way to explore them, celebrate them, affirm them, and most importantly, normalize them, and make the world safe enough for people who share them to exist. As a University of Chicago graduate with a BA in Cinema and Media Studies and English, she brings her over 7 years of pop culture analysis, 4 years of film theory training, and a healthy appetite for change. Her writing has been featured in outlets like Entertainment Weekly, Essence, The Root, BET, Paper, Huffington Post, MTV News, Wear Your Voice magazine, and more. She is also the creator of #The Kent Test, a media litmus test designed to evaluate the quality of representation that exists for women of color in film and other media. Oh my God, yes. Clarkisha, please join us on the show. Hello, there you are. Go. Oh, there we go. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
There you are. Okay. Hello. Okay, so first off, go ahead and tell us about yourself and why you're choosing to do this episode.
Quick and dirty about myself. Well, depending on where you know me from, I am definitely, internet shit talker. Like, that's been my thing for a while. I've enjoyed it as you can see, because it got me here, right? But yeah, internet shit talker. But I be shit talking from a place of I don't want to say diversity, inclusion, but like, speaking up for people who share like my marginalized identities, like you mentioned in my bio. So yeah, but Clarkisha, I've been writing since I was single digits, and now I've ascended to completing my big sim aspiration goal, which was to, write a book, become an author. So now really the sky is the limit from here for real. Cause like I did the big one. So now it's just
Mhm.
like I can do whatever else that comes to me now. So yeah, that's what I would say like the short of it is for
Yeah.
me.
Beautiful. Thank you. Um, so I've been reading your book and it is so powerful. I mean, you want to talk about like being seen and heard, like your voice, my life. It was just incredible. So please tell us a bit about your background and upbringing. I know that was a huge part of your story.
Yeah, so as either you've read or you're going to read, I am Nigerian, specifically Nigerian-American. My parents brought me here, and their own journey here was very rough, but they brought me here, or I was born here, I should say. They came here, they pushed me, I was yeeted out, my mom, so I was here, and, they specifically settled into Tennessee, which is always interesting because you start talking to people and they're like Africans in Tennessee, and I'm like, yeah, like it's always like what. So we stayed in Tennessee, and that was interesting, right? Because we're Nigerians, but there's a specific like southern experience there in terms of like Appalachian South, because people like to compress parts of the South, and I'm like, there are different
Mhm.
Souths, baby, there are. So that's where I
Yep.
was, and place taught me a lot. But particularly my parents, as many of us can probably attest to, they were in fact my first bullies, right? Unfortunately. So um everything that people will see me lay out in the book are things that like I started learning in that house. So if we're talking about fat phobia, colorism, et cetera, like those were the first instances where I was like it was introduced to me. Like the outside world didn't have to like bully me or nothing. My parents did it. And then I got to the outside world. I was like, oh, so this what this is. I didn't
Right.
have the words before, but okay. So that's like, you know, my condensed, I guess, origin story.
Well, no, that's real. That's real. Looking at the conversation of the things they said prepared you for the reality of life
Yes.
because
Yes.
that's the dynamic, the paradigm that we've been in. Yeah. And I feel you about the South. I think that is a unique conversation. Anybody who has been to multiple places in the United States, none of them are alike. And so pointing out like the Appalachian South, I don't even know what that looks like and what that means, but I know you talked a bit more about like the oppression in your upbringing. So I would love for you to share that part.
Oh, like within my upbringing, I mean, I started off the book talking about how like the vehicle of oppression for me within that house came through like the family structure, right? I talk about how it's like, the first society you're introduced to, right? Your parents are God, and you're the child, and you have to listen to whatever the fuck they say because they said it, right? Until you get to a certain age where you're like, no, I don't. I don't have to listen to what? No, I don't have to listen to you. What? But yeah, it was one of those things where, I don't want to give too much of the book away, but like y'all are gonna read kind of the trajectory of my parents, their trip,
Mm.
not their trip, their immigration to US, and how that kind of sent everything into a tailspin. So it's one of those things, unfortunately, where the things that they experienced, that they had gone through, they decided to like take it out on, their kids. Story as old as time, displays anger, all that. Um, and then, because of their own like biases, whether like internalized or not,
Mm.
that's what they used against us. That's what they
Yeah.
used against me. And for me, is I was an easier target because, like I mentioned, I have like a Hulk stack of identities. So it's like, oh yeah,
Right.
you right there. So
Right.
that's kind of
Um,
what happened.
Thank you, thank you. And I actually I wasn't asking about like the narrative of your family, but more like the types of oppression that you
Oh,
experience.
Yeah.
inside that conversation, because there's just so many, and I think that people can completely relate to that part of who you are. So yeah, can we just a little bit around that?
Yeah, so I mean, colorism was a big one, which was always funny because like it's a family of dark skinned people. Like it was always confusing. I was like, technically, I was the darker one, which that's also a reason why we should talk about pigmentography, excuse me, and shadeism. Like it, colorism is way more intense than people realize because the ranges and what happens when you add like featureism, so like nose, mouth, you start adding all this other stuff in, it gets more complex, right? But I guess to them I was the darkest one, so the intensity of colorism that I experienced was a lot. So then you had kind of like the gender essentialism factor of the household. So like people will read the book, a lot of that was like exercised through like hair, through food and diet, which is why we have to get into that in the book. The fat phobia too. So like most things you can think of, especially within like a Black family, like came up. Homophobia, lesbophobia, it was a lot, like my parents are, conservative Nigerians, and like they made it known. Let's just say that they made it known. And it's one of those things where like I really, really had to dig deep and, carve my own path. So I wasn't falling into the traps of their own really bigoted biases.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of that, you had also mentioned like having the language, being able to talk about it. Like, cause there's so many there's all these words, there's all these things we say, and those all hit home, when that is who you are, when that's a part of your identity. So share just a little bit about like having that empowerment to be able to speak on your own behalf.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything like it. Because there is definitely power in reclaiming that narrative, right? Because when you don't have the language, it is really hard to explain to people why they have you fucked up, or like why a particular system has you fucked up, because you're just like, oh, this thing happened, yada yada, and they're like, okay, but what is, a lot of people be like, oh, what's the significance of that? Like that's the implication if they feel like you're not explaining it correctly or eloquently, right? So I feel like when you have that language, there's really no more excuses, right? Besides, like they can try to gaslight you. That's about it.
Right.
After that,
They all out
and
like
some
not
people try
believe.
it, right? Yeah, some people try it, but like once you have the language, essentially you're like really forcing them to confront what it is that's being discussed. So yeah, as someone who studied English, like I'm very serious about that. I was like, words do mean things. Like people say it jokingly, but like
Right.
words do mean things. So as much as I hate this fucking language, I'm just like, learn the language, y'all. Like that's important. Like whether it's like in your everyday life, interpersonal relationships, whether we're talking about something more complex like the law, like the way that's written to like purposely confuse people, like it's really important to know that language and to learn that language.
Yeah. Yeah. When you can actually do something about it, which, yep. So I want to talk about the stereotypes of
Mhm.
being inside of all of these different dynamics and bodies. I know that stereotypes are one of the main things that lead to not being seen, not being heard, and the invisible things that can arise in that space.
Yes. Can you mind like restating the question? I want to make sure it's the right answer.
Sorry, be all long-winded. Let's talk about stereotypes.
Okay. So like stereotypes associated with these different like oppressive, powers or okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we gonna start from like we'll start with fat phobia / biblical things, right? So fat phobia is always so interesting to me in the fact that like obviously we know it is rooted in anti-blackness. Like if you have not read Fear of the Black Body by Sabrina Strings. That is your assigned reading after this live stream. Like, go find it and go read it, right? Because like that phobia literally was, birthed by racism, by anti-Black. Like, that's where it's coming from. That's what informs it, and that's what informs society too. So that being said, if we're talking about fat phobia, some of the common stereotypes you will come across is like the lazy fat, right? TV tropes is good for this. Like, if you ever curious, just go into TV tropes and put like fat tropes. Like, the page will be so long, girl. It just be so long. But like the invulnerable fat, like acting like we can't really experience pain. The lazy, sloppy fat. What else? The dim-witted, the dumb fat. Like, we can keep going. If we're talking biblically, right? People will always tie fatness back to gluttony, back to sloth, right? And it's supposed to be seen as this really like disgusting thing. That's like the basis of all of this, right? Disgust and hate, and therefore also what oppression, excuse me. Other stereotypes, when we're talking about darker skin, the mammy obviously is always the number one, right? But people forget about, what was it? I think they call it, was it the sapphire? So like the loud, uncouth, rude, maybe possibly unintelligent, dark-skinned woman. Like, there are a couple of those like that. When we're talking about disability and stereotypes, there are many, but I feel like the ones that particularly offend me when we're talking about media is always like the evil disabled person, but like not in the way people are thinking. It's always like someone who's terrible and therefore like disfigured, which that has a lot of implications, right? And horror heads that like are familiar with the genre like I am know that like a lot of like these villains, these oogie boogies as I would call them, like usually have some sort of disfigurement or disabled in some sort of way, right? So I'm like, that says a lot about y'all that you keep doing this. Like, what's that dude name? Is it Ari Aster or something? He little strange, and I think he 2 for 2 now in movies where like there's like some disabled or disfigured person that like is looked at really strangely, or is supposed to be serving as some like jump scare. Like he be doing a lot, but those are the ones that really offend me. Like, there's some inherent like villainy in being disfigured, right? And it happens more often than people like to admit. They'll be like, I ain't never seen. I'm like, no, go back to your little favorite movies. You've seen it. I promise you. You were paying attention. That's different. But you've seen it.
Exactly. Yes.
So,
when your perspective shifts, that's when you're able to actually see the stuff on the other side and have compassion for it. And until it shifts, you never see it. And then once you see it, it never goes back. And that's a part of the learning and what we need. You said that, and my immediate thought was, oh yeah, Captain Hook. Who else had an eye patch? Like, there's all these different, just very simple base narratives that are right in what you're saying. And then to throw it back to colorism, oftentimes a lot of the villains are portrayed as darker skin, dark toned, all this ominous stuff. And it's like, now we're feeding more into that conversation.
And those are just the tip of the iceberg. Because if we were getting to, homosexuality, et cetera, like, you'll start to see more of it. But like, those are just like the more common ones, so to speak. So, someone who like really looks critically at media, it's always so interesting to see people's like biases and their bigotry hop out in their media, even though they think they're being very subtle.
Yeah. And they think they're being inclusive.
Yeah.
Yep. Whole nother conversation.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? Because we talk about like representation and who is actually in the conversation. You talk about like the trope of the fat black woman and the mammy and that whole conversation. It's like now we're reducing it to that's all you can be if you fit the stereotype of that body. Like
Yes.
we're going to reduce you down to that concept. And we'll include you in these ways, in
Yeah.
these parts. So, um, okay, so you mentioned that when you are larger bodied, there are a
Mhm.
lot of things that go unseen, and I know we spoke about eating disorders and that being one of the big ones.
Mhm.
So I would love for you to share your story, and just not all the details, but just what was there for you and how you got to that place.
So if we're talking about like particularly like the disorder eating part, always very complex because when people hear the two words eating disorder, 99.9% of the time the first image that's gonna pop into their head is a thin white woman or a thin white girl.
Mhm.
And people can lie all they want to, but usually if you hear eating disorder, it's gonna be some white person popping up in your head before
Mhm.
anybody else. Even
Mhm.
another like fat white person, right? Like it's always gonna be like a thin white person talking about it, right? Allegedly, right? Because people talk about it, they just don't listen to us, right? So when I was younger, from like single digits, my parents were like on me about my weight. So then, I got into things like Slim Fast, and people remember Slim Fast Special K. Um,
Mhm.
there was like the 100-calorie snack pack from like Nabisco when they had the snack pack Oreos. So I was into all of that. I was into all of that. All of that.
Yes.
I was into that. So, yeah, I thought I was, based on my parents running commentary, I thought I was doing the right thing by like, um, you know, exercising excessively, which, counts as ED. It's called purging disorder, right? Exercising excessively and really restricting my diet and only eating certain things. And then, that restriction pushing me to like binge later. So
Mhm.
those were all things that like were going on behind the scenes, right? Because I wanted to be seen as like not fat. Because in my household, particularly, not just the community, but in my household in particularly, it was my belief that like no longer being fat would mean that like I would not be like abused as much. So
Mhm.
that's kind of like the root of everything. Obviously, as the book goes, like that ends up like going beyond my parents' house, but like that's the source. So that's what I was preoccupied with. If I could not be seen as this fat person, if I could finally be seen as just a regular human being or whatever, maybe like I won't get harmed as much or etc. So that was kind of the struggle within the house. Outside the house is one of those things where I was like, you know especially as a younger child, especially in high school, like, I want to be hot. I want to be desirable. You
Mhm.
know, I want some candy on my arm, maybe both arms, who knows, right? And, becoming, or being rendered, I should say, because I didn't do it to myself, being rendered invisible by my peers because of, colorism and fat phobia, did its own number on me, right? So, it really, like, as a fat child, fat teen, like, they really be giving it to you from all sides. So I'd be like, kudos to those of us who, dragged ourselves to adulthood, because it was rough.
We made it.
It was rough, rough, rough.
Yep. We made it. We made it.
Yeah.
And I love what you were creating in the book, because I grew up like I was always chunky. I like from, I don't know, maybe 4 years on. And I would go through so much. It was like when you lose weight, like you get a cookie.
Yeah, like, what are you doing? Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
congratulations. And then on the other side of that, just being larger, people like I was put on diet pills when I was like 8. Right, right.
yeah.
And they gave me heart palpitations. It was horrible. I also, I like, I was just the other day, I was like, oh, I need to lose weight. And my immediate thought was, I could stop eating.
You're just like, oh, where'd that come from? Oh
Right,
shit,
right.
yeah. It happens. It's a lifelong struggle. Like, I want to stress that. I don't want people to think that like I'm coming on here and I'm like, I've been healed, I've been saved, like on that shit. No, it is like a lifelong thing. You have to check yourself more times than you would like. But it's also important to be patient with yourself. See, you had that thought and you were like, pause, okay, hold on. There was you didn't spiral. You didn't be like, why would I? No, you're just like, okay,
Right.
all right, brain, that's enough from you. It's enough. Okay, we're gonna take a break and we'll come back. But yeah, it's why it's also important to be like patient and kind to ourselves as fat people, because they really be trying to hit us with this propaganda. They be trying to incept this terrible shit into our brain. So when sometimes when our brain says it's terrible shit, you just have to be like, all right, relax. Like relax.
Yeah.
Relax.
And even remember a little bit of that trauma.
Yes.
I remember my mom telling me that it would be better if I had an eating disorder, because then at least I would be skinny. And the truth of the matter is, it's not like that wasn't there under the surface, but like you said, that frail, skinny, shaking white girl image, it's like that's what we expect to see. So if you're not that, then it's encouraged. Yeah, have an eating disorder, all these things. And even like you mentioned, like the working out, like you don't think about people having eating disorders when they're fit.
No, it never occurs to you. You're like, oh, you're the pinnacle of health, right? Allegedly.
Right.
Allegedly.
Oh, but yeah, we did make it. We really did. I think one of the big things that people don't see about being in the trope that we exist in is that there's a lot of abuse and there's a lot of damage, and it's very common to have considered suicide. I mean, as a Black woman overall, but as a dark-skinned Black woman, like, we get the least amount of cookies.
Yeah.
And
which is zero.
and like that does something to self-esteem, humanity, all these different things. So I love reading, like I love reading what you wrote and just how honest and raw you are about it. And this is creating visibility for so many people who go unseen.
Yeah.
So we talked about the pinnacle of health. Now let's talk about the medical industry.
All right, let's get into it. Let's get into it. Yes, look for them.
So being unseen in the medical industry, being considered the pinnacle of health. And then let's talk about the treatment that people who don't fit these stereotypes actually receive.
Yeah. So, as a fat person, fat Black person too, right? It get dicier, but like as a fat person, right? These doctors, these hospitals, they don't love us. Whenever they see us coming, it's like, apparently it's the apocalypse for them. Like, I could go into the hospital right now as a fat person, but especially a fat Black person, right? Go into the hospital, I can have a freaking axe like lodged in my skull. And the first thing the doctor is going to do, I promise you, is weigh me and then be like, girl, so I know you got to like axe your head and your brain is probably split open, but have you considered losing weight? And like, they will say that to you, like, just dead, just so like, so they're so serious. And you're just like, I got to axe in my head, but you tell me I got to lose weight. Okay. Like, there's so many horror stories from like, either like current fat people or like former fats who were like, yo, I like straight up had cancer, and the doctor was like, oh, lose some weight, and didn't even catch the cancer. The next two doctors had to catch it, because the first one is preoccupied with your weight.
Right.
So yeah, these doctors don't love us, and because they don't love us, they don't give a fuck. We miss out not just on important care and treatment, but the research, right? Because they're too busy pathologizing us. They're too busy demonizing us. Like every time you hear that word obese, dog whistle. Okay, dog
Mm-hmm.
whistle. You yourself as a human being are not a disease. Okay, that's what they like to
Mm.
say. They throw that word out, to make us be like, oh, you're diseased, you're nasty, you're disgusting. But no, we're not. They're just bigoted. They're just bigoted. And at the center of it too is laziness. Like even if we're going back to discuss fat phobia and anti-blackness, right? Um, you're lazy. You don't want to do that extra research to understand your patient who may be a different background than you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not only bigotry, but it's laziness. Like,
Mm-hmm.
'cause you could go the extra mile and learn, but some of these people don't want to.
Yeah.
But because they're lazy, we get the raw end because now you're not getting proper treatment, and subsequently there's not enough research to find proper treatment if the treatment doesn't exist yet, right? And it's like the same thing with eating disorders, right? Because there's that image of the thin frail white woman in people's heads when we say EDs. We're missing out on really important research about how it affects Black women, how it affects fat Black women, how it affects people with disability.
Mm-hmm.
We're missing out on key research that could really help us address the issue rather than like skirting around it, rather than allowing people who suffer from it to just exist in the shadows. Because again, the research and the material is not there.
Mm-hmm.
So we're having to rely on personal narratives, which is not inherently bad, but it's one of those things where like personal narratives and research should be working like together in tandem,
Right.
to help for treatment. But again, bigotry, people's biases. And I would say, obviously, I don't have the hardcore numbers, so I can't say. I would say, personally, a lot of former fats go into medicine and then be the ones who are doing this to us. I can't say that for sure,
Right.
the numbers, but it's like from what I've encountered, I'll be like, you used to be fat, didn't you? Okay, that's what I got. All right,
I
so
can
that
hear
I
that
know, yeah,
internalized shame.
right. I can hear I guess the fat 10-year old in you just relishing degrading me. So
Ooh, you just made me thankful for a sec. I had a doctor who was a Black woman, actually first generation, but she was thick. She was a real like hefty bodied woman, and she's a doctor. And I'm like, this is something that you also don't necessarily see get empowered, because that doesn't fit the way things have always been done.
yeah,
Right.
narrative,
The
yeah.
status quo. So I never received that kind of treatment from her. And it's not until I step out of that mentally and think about like what goes on with other doctors and situations, paradigms, I'm like, yeah, that felt safe. She got me. She understood.
Mhm.
Like that's a whole different experience from people who aren't trying to get you at all. You also, this dot I've always seen in the past, but I love how in this conversation I just fully connected it. So the whole racism behind the BMI test, like we can't have this conversation and not talk about BMI, body
Mhm.
mass index, for anybody who hasn't been
Mhm.
judged on that scale. And I remember I'm like, I'm not a tall woman. Based on my height, they have it. I should be 98 pounds. Right. And
Mhm.
there is
Mhm.
just
You
no
turn into Oscar Proud, you're gonna turn sideways and disappear.
exactly. And I've always been like, I feel like that's based on the body of, in my mind, I was thinking like an Asian bodied person at my height, because of the way that um stereotype, but also the people that I've seen in that actual body size. Like I couldn't imagine getting that small, not in my body. So yeah, thank you for just kind of like, we're swirling all that together, and I really want
Mhm.
people to hear and know like there's layers here,
Yeah.
and they are not pretend or imagined. Um Somebody actually asked me earlier before the show
Mhm.
to address mental disorders. And I would love if we could talk about that conversation.
Of course. So I mean, what is it? I got so much up here. So what is it you want to discuss specifically?
Well, the being unseen, and I'll share what's actually there for me. And
Okay.
um, so I have been diagnosed bipolar, and that's something
One or
that
two.
two.
Two. All right.
Two.
Squad.
Yes.
Squad.
Um, if you don't know the uniquenesses, go look them up.
Right.
But yeah, so in that space as a larger body black woman, I always get like whenever I'm like passionate about something, it's like, oh, I'm angry or I'm hostile
Hmm.
or I'm mean.
Yep.
And I look at that combined with like the judgment and invisibility around mental health, that it's like, oh, this is another way to write off and disregard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
um, so I don't, would you mind sharing like that experience for yourself? Because that's another thing where your life is telling my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think something good to bring up would be most recently the uptick, put that in parentheses, right? Because it was really lack of research once again that I've struck, right? But
Research and resources.
right. So it was the uptick in like diagnoses for ADHD and specifically autism within Black people, Black women, Black non-men, and how that conversation has always been interesting to me because they're like, oh, all of a sudden everyone is nope, not all of a sudden. We didn't have the resources. There was no
Hmm.
research. Now we know better. We can do better, right? But
Hmm.
it's always interesting to me talking to my peers too who have experienced their recent diagnoses, in the fact that the disbelief that people are perpetuating because of this uptick like directly feeds into anti-blackness, right? Because it's assumed that we don't deal with any of these things, because in the minds of, like, I guess the typical racist, typical bigot, being Black is like bad enough, right? It's like, it's just bad enough. Like, that's I guess the
Right.
worst thing they could imagine, right? So they couldn't imagine that there's additional things that have to be contended with, especially when disability enters the picture. So if I'm thinking like that, then yeah, I'm totally ignoring the possibility of you possibly having mental disorder, right? And EDs are included because that's part of the conversation. Something is mentally, off,
Right.
for being
Right.
honest, and it's affecting your ability to feed yourself, and to maintain and take care of your body and etc. So
The
yeah, it's
ED,
always, you said what?
ED was eating disorder.
Yes, yeah, eating
Okay.
disorder,
Cool.
yeah. And yeah, not the other one, not the other one, y'all. Eating, not erectile eating.
You understand why we had to
Yeah,
clarify.
I was like, hold on, the other one, not that one. Okay, that one, the food one, yeah.
There we go.
But yeah, it's always interesting because like people they assume so much, seeing this. So that also affects again the way we get diagnosed if we get diagnosed. A central issue in my book when it came to my diagnoses was the fact that, ironically, if Black women get diagnosed for any mental disorder, it's gonna be bipolar. It's gonna be bipolar disorder. So my like psychologists and psychiatrists, they were at crossroads because they're like, the research you've provided is sound. That said, because y'all tend to get overdiagnosed, I am now confused. If that was the crossroads me and my therapist went through. Because one of those things
Oh,
were like, they'd be so happy, to slap that on us. Like
right.
they will resist, slapping us with ADHD. They'll resist slapping us with autism, OCD. Like they will resist everything else. But once you say bipolar, they're like, yeah, that's you.
Right. Right.
That's you. You dead.
Yep.
And
PTSD.
right, that too, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
um it's just so interesting because once again people's like bigotry is like literally stopping them from accepting facts or pursuing science. Like it's weird. It's weird, but it's not weird. It's by design, obviously. But yeah,
Right.
they really
It's by a design that nobody wants to be responsible for. Take
yes.
responsibility for.
Yes.
I and that's one of the hardest parts because like we get this system we're in was built however long ago, not that long,
Right.
and and until we take the responsibility to stop feeding into it, that's how it's going to always be.
Yeah.
Ooh, body dysmorphia.
Mm-hmm.
So please share with us what you think about that one because I won't lie, I have had it, and I
Mm-hmm.
imagine that a lot of people out there maybe even still do. I won't lie, but I feel like it's very common, and a lot of people don't know what like about it enough about it.
Mm-hmm. So I'm not the dictionary, so I'm not gonna probably provide as much as like an accurate definition, an accurate textbook definition. But I will know that I will say that with body dysmorphia, like, quite literally affects your perception of yourself. Like for me personally, like I didn't know. On top of like my fat phobic upbringing, like I really was like I don't know what the fuck I look like for real. So it was like causing some very interesting crises on top of the fat phobia. So it's one of those things where like, okay, if I go to, let's say you go to the mall and they have their own mirror, you look a certain way there. You go home to your bathroom mirror, you look a certain way there. Let's say you go downstairs to, I don't know, the hallway closet got a mirror, you look different. You open your camera, you look different, right? You're just like, what the fuck is going on? Like what the hell's going on? Like you're like, what? So when you have issues with your body, like image, self-esteem, and then again you have this adversarial relationship with food, your body, the way you move your body, like fitness wise, and you just add that element of like, I actually don't know what the fuck is going on here. I don't know what the fuck I look like. I don't know who you start adding that together. It's very much like a dangerous recipe for disaster that can in fact like slide into the suicidal realm, like happened with me. So that's how I understand it. And that's why I also, online, I tell people like, like really think about what you mean when you say that, because some people say and it's really fat phobia, they just don't want to say that,
Mhm.
but like really think about that stuff, because like it is actually a thing, so it's important to not conflate it with any like internalized fat phobia or whatever have you.
Yeah, yeah, that's very real. The conversation around body dysmorphia, you put it so perfectly. Like I think that they do exist together, and I actually see one causing the other.
Yes.
I know, yeah, like I definitely have experienced it, and while ago I got the lap band bariatric surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole slew of reasons why, blah, 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 blah. Ain't really
Listen,
going there. Right.
yeah, you got it. Listen, that's your business.
Right. But I discovered afterwards, I'm like, oh, this is a surgically induced eating disorder. That's what this is. And I remember waking up one day because, like, it had just, like, time had passed. I was doing whatever I needed to do. I woke up one day and I looked down at my legs and I was like, whose fucking legs are these? Like, it was completely like overnight, my brain had to repattern itself. And it doesn't matter what size I've always been me.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't like, I think that the paranoia and the phobia of it is actually what creates the pain around it.
Yes. Yes, and that's always that's a lot of what you describe, and thank you for being honest about it. What described is what a lot of these fitness people and diet experts, that's what they don't like to talk about that. Like even if you were to play into their fat phobic narratives and you do the hardcore dieting and the hardcore exercising, that rapid weight loss will usually bite you in the ass, because now you're not letting your body play catch up. So a lot of what I've seen is like people lose the weight, and their body physically can't keep up. So let's say one example is like they have like the sagging skin, and then there's
Mhm.
like unhappiness about that, because you're just like, what is that, but it's you didn't give your body time to you know like do the thing, so now it has to like try to regain elasticity and stuff, and that's going to take its own amount of time. So a lot of
Right.
time that also complicates the weight loss process for a lot of people. But again, these diet pushers and fitness, they won't tell you that. They won't tell you that. They won't tell you that the journey will still be rough, even if you do happen to lose the weight, because yeah, your body has changed, but has your brain changed?
Right.
Probably not,
That
you know
part.
because that work has not been done.
Mm. Mm. Okay. Wow. Wow. I hope y'all heard that part. Everybody out there watching, listening, whatnot. Wow. You just blew my fucking mind.
Yeah, it's people like fitness is down here, wellness is down here. Okay, yeah, but it's really up here, and your stomach too. People forget that. Listen, that's why when you get anxious or whatever, the first thing that's going to act up is your stomach. Stomach, brain, they like this. They like this. So if one is fucked up, the other one is also going to most likely be fucked up too.
Wow. Okay, I just gotta let my brain catch up to that. Wow. That is so powerful what you just said, because it is true. It's true. Whether you're this size or that size or whatever, you're still sick,
Yeah.
quote unquote. Like whatever is going on, it's still in you, it's still with you. And I think that's one of the main reasons why, when we get into the eating disorder conversation, there's such a disconnect from who you are and what you look like.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
This work, I shouldn't do this. This work hasn't been done.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Okay. let's talk about let's talk about internalized discrimination.
Yes. Let's talk about it. We're gonna talk about.
Because that's what this is.
Mhm.
Like so many layers of this. We talked about, doctors inside of the medical industry. We talked about colorism, texturism, the conversations around familiar, like family, and the way that those prejudices build from there. Like
Yeah.
that for me, it's the first breeding ground. It's your preschool for stepping into how the world is going to treat you.
Yep.
So I know for myself, it's like, if I can beat myself down before you get to it, I will be okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. So let's talk about, like, if you don't mind sharing some of your experiences or some of the experiences that you've come across during your work.
With like internalized, like,
Yeah, discrimination.
um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think a really good is, I keep talking about this, but I'm gonna keep talking about it because they irritate the fuck out of me. I'm not gonna lie to you. The former fats, or the gym people who used to be fat, right? That's a subcategory, but the former fats are always the ones that really get under my skin, because they be even more violent than people who've always been thin or fit. Um, there's
Hmm.
just something
Hmm.
in their brains. I mean, I'll be slightly fair to them in that, like, they experience the same discrimination and propaganda that I was subject to, right? I'm gonna give them that. The issue arises, and they be having me fucked up, because not only did they internalize it, right? Because that's one thing, but they
Hmm.
decided that a symptom of their internalization is going to be taking out their frustrations on you, who is still fat, right? But
Right.
even me calling it frustration is not enough, because what really it is their unhappiness, their dissatisfaction with the fact that, again, they lost the weight. They put on the muscle they were told to do. They did this, they did that, and they still don't fuck with themselves, right? So when they see you, fat person, who like, again, you still be going through your own stuff, but for the most part, you're like, okay, I'm fat, and then what? Like, I'm cool with being this, right? I'm cool with owning this, right? And despite what has happened to you, you didn't buy into the hype. You're like, okay, well, I'm still fat, so you're not gonna beat my ass about it. They get so upset because they're like, how can you fat ass be happy and I'm not happy? And I'm maybe because I don't know. I guess your inside's terrible or something. I don't know. I see your pain, but I've decided that I'm not going to be someone who perpetuates it on my end. So they are really, really good examples because like you can really see, like, honestly, if you go on social media and just like watch, like, and just really watch somebody just going in off fat people. Just watch it. And then do some research. Like, go up and down their page a little bit. And I've done this so many times, and 99.9% of the time, you scroll long enough, you see some old tweets or some old posts where they complain about being fat. You may see some old pictures where they were fat. Like, you will see the evidence, and you'll be like, oh, okay, so that's why you are the way you are. That's why you really don't like us, because you did all this, all the bells and the whistles, probably starved yourself even, and you still you're still the same mentally and emotionally. Like, nothing really changed. Like, yeah, your body, the size of it changed, but like mentally, spiritually, emotionally, you still stuck. And rather than looking within to fix that, now you make it every other fat person's issue ever, which no. So for me, they're the most famous example. Like, we can get into anti-blackness too with Coons and Uncle Toms and et cetera, but like for me, like, the former fats really do piss me off. They really do piss me off, because I be trying not to say anything to them about them, but they be looking for me to say something to me and about me. So now I'm like, now I have to respond. Wasn't worried about you, but now I have time.
Right. Oh my God. Yes. There's a narrative of, I can do it. You can do it too. Why won't you do it? Oh, you're happy being the way you don't want to do what you're supposed to do? Because I did it. There's that whole swirling conversation. Oh,
they be so mad. And I'd be like, and it gets worse too. Like, obviously, this will be a whole other conversation that me and you can have one day. But it gets much worse too if you fat like me and you, and we got some candy. Got some candy on our arms. Got some like sexy there. They be like, you, and I'm like, yes, baby girl. they be looking. They do. They be looking for my fat ass. Yes, they be like, hey girl, and I be like, what's up? They be looking for. They really don't like that. Like, you're happy and you're partnered, right? Because to a lot of people, right, especially we're thinking about like cishet people, because I'm cis, but I still unfortunately am somewhat attracted to cishet man. It's very unfortunate, but but that said, they're not centered in my life, right? So if for some reason I'm not officially partnered, the world does not end for me. I got other shit to do anyway. But for a lot of people, partnership is one of the big like end goals. So if you're a fat person and you have a partner who is bad as fuck like you are, they get mad. They get so mad. Because once again, they were fed the lies that, if you starve yourself, you did this, you did that, you would get this, I guess, perfect life that apparently this fat person that, that's still fat has. So they get irrationally angry. Like, I've seen some of these TikTok like influencer couples where like, you got the fat wife, fit husband, that kind of thing going on. And if you can see some of these husbands like DMs, like one dude was just like, y'all gotta stop this shit. Like he came, because usually the vibe of the TikTok channel is really, happy go like, really cute, happy go like shit. Like he came on there one day, he was like, you bitches gotta stop this shit. Like he said bitches, but like he's like, y'all gotta stop this shit. Like he was like this is the garbage that y'all be putting in my inbox, and y'all acting like I'm not supposed to say anything. And a lot of these posts and DMs were like, obviously deriding his wife, being like, oh, I'm harder than her, like, you could be with me, like that's the spirit of these messages. Like, oh, like you don't have to be like with your fat wife, like that's not something you have to be saddled with, like if you don't want her really, because I'm thin and therefore beautiful, so like you should definitely want me. And I'm like, the audacity of people. And I was just looking at him like, you so much better than me. Because the way I would have like a speed round of cutting together these comments to like roast people, I would be in big, like TikTok would suspend me for like a week, because I'd just be like, all right, so user 6455 Sally Mays, let me tell you something about yourself. Like I would really blow up her page. Let me tell you something. You got my wife's name in your mouth, but let me tell you something about yourself. Like I will be in so much trouble, because one thing about me, you can say whatever you want about me, because I don't give a fuck. The moment you open your dirty ass mouth to talk about my friends, what few family I have left, right, or my partner, I cannot be responsible for what happens next. I'm sorry. Like, I cannot be held responsible for what happens next, because you shouldn't have done it. You shouldn't have said nothing, because now I just have to let the chopper spray, because that's sometimes that is the only way people learn, unfortunately. Like you can try to have all the conversations that you want. You can really try to call people in and sit down and talk to them, like, person to person. And sometimes it still won't help. Sometimes you really got to smack somebody upside the head. You just like, who are you talking to? Like, what? So yeah, very long-winded of me, but that is to say, like, former fats are the ones that really, like, when we were discussing internalizing oppression and that kind of thing, they're the ones that really, like, they get under my skin. They do.
Yeah. There's like the most damage. Oh my goodness. Ooh. Okay. I can't even. I'm gonna tell this real quick. I got into an Uber one day, and the driver took it upon himself to tell me about his wife's weight loss program after getting weight loss surgery, and how I should do it too. And here's her information. Please call her. I'm like, will you just drop me the fuck off?
0 stars. 0 stars. I'd have been like, 0 stars. I'm not a barbarian, so I will still tip you as a service worker, but 0 stars. And when Uber asks, I will tell them, be like, this is a fat full big motherfucker that you sent to pick me up. I don't like that. Like, I will tell them. Because I just minding my black ass, fat ass business, and here come somebody with their unsolicited healthcare opinion. Meanwhile, the same people, this used to kill me in school too. The same people, they on your case. Meanwhile, their bloodstream is comprised of hot Cheetos, pink lemonade, and some lemon heads. If they go check their cholesterol right now, the doctor is going to keep them in the hospital, because those levels will be so bad. But you have the nerve to be talking about my fat ass. Like, I don't get it. I personally don't get it, but
right. Okay. We have reached the end of our hour, and this is just so juicy. Can you tell us where we can get your book, how we can follow up with you, and all the stuff to follow and support your work?
Yes. So if you want to support me also like buy the book, you can find all that at my website, www.clarkishakent.com. In terms of like buying the book specifically, if you want to go straight there, my book is featured on feministpress.org, and my book is displayed right now because it just released on Tuesday. Elsewhere, if we're talking about social media, I'll be on Twitter. That's the OG platform in terms of my shit talking. And I am at @iWriteAllDay_. And then we have IG. IG, I'm there at Clarkisha Kent. I also have a Hive too, if y'all are on there, Hive Social, but it's the same at Clarkisha Kent. That's where I am in most places, but those are like the top 3 social platforms I like still utilize. So yeah.
Fantastic. All right, everybody, get the book, support the work, keep the conversation going, because we need to keep talking about this shit. Thank you so much for being on today, Clarkisha. Thank you. All right. So everybody out there, thank you for joining us today. The ItCast is our community outreach podcast that increases diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. Through this work, we are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. This season, we have on this Saturday, March 11th, Releasing Sexual Shame, A Pathway to Freedom with Ethology Collective from 1 to 4. And then that'll be again on March 21st with Boundless Events. You can get more information at ethologycollective.org and boundlessevents.org. This weekend in the city at Jolene's Variety Burlesque Show Brunch. Join us. It's going to be phenomenal and incredible and a lot of fun. My company sponsors their events, so please come and see everything that we do. Book a one-on-one coaching session with me. We got the link popping up somewhere. See more about our events at theitcast.com. Get the bonus content on Patreon. Learn more about us and subscribe to this YouTube channel. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. And we will see you here next week.